Welcome to the jet setters and the high rollers, to the shot takers and the tastemakers. Welcome to the viewfinders, the thrill seekers, and the night owls. Welcome to everything you could possibly want on one 5-mile island. Welcome to the Wildwoods. Book your stay today.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let Jacob Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call Jacob Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428. We welcome you in to this week's edition of the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. Thank you so much for being with us for another week and another conversation with a very, very special guest, JDoc. I'll let you set the stage, as I always do, for our listening audience and for our viewing audience who are watching across the network and watching it on Apple TV, Roku, and Fire. So good stuff as the Labor and Energy Show continues to follow the mission of educating the public.
Yeah, and Joe, today's a special show. You're correct. We're coast to coast today. We have a special guest, okay, who Tim Sbranti, Executive Director, Contra Costa County Building and Construction Trades Council, and we get the opportunity, and I don't think we've ever done this before on the Labor and Energy Show or the Labor Show, have the opportunity to in a sense have a dialogue, from our friends and our partners on the West Coast, and so talk about their issues, talk about labor, talk about energy, talk about a lot of things that will bring a different perspective to our listeners throughout the East Coast. So really excited to have Tim on the broadcast. Can't wait.
And just a quick reminder for anybody tuning in today, don't forget you can download the audio version of this broadcast via Apple or Spotify, and you can listen to it at your convenience. The show, the Labor and Energy Show, gets a tremendous amount of activity via our podcast. So if you miss it in real time, or if you want to go back and rewatch this show and or listen to any of the other library or catalog of programming done here on the Labor and Energy Show, please do so. Podcast-wise, it's on Apple or Spotify. JDoc, I'll give you 35 seconds before we get into our first break, and then we'll pause for 30 seconds, and then we'll get started with you and your special guest.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, we couldn't be more excited than to have Tim on the program to get a new perspective on, a West Coast labor movement, what they do, in their neck of the woods, and certainly we're excited to also provide our perspective here, knowing that we're all brothers and sisters. We have a lot of the same challenges, and certainly looking forward to learning from one another, and just having a great conversation.
Good, well stated. This is the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. We'll get to our first commercial break here. JDoc and Tim will be back on the other side. Back in a moment. If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let Jacob Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call Jacob Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Labor and Energy Show here on the Jacob Media Network. We are coast to coast today with Tim Sbranti, Contra Costa Building and Construction Trades Council Executive Director. How are you, Tim?
I'm doing well. Good morning, JDoc. It's a little earlier out here on the West Coast.
I was just going to say good morning. It certainly is where you are, sir, and couldn't be more appreciative, by the way, that you're taking the time at this early hour in California to join the broadcast, and certainly like I said, it's an East Coast, West Coast show. And I want to welcome you. But before we start, I want to also give a shout out to Adrian Broca of the AFPM and Mike Partridge of PBF Energy for co-producing this broadcast and putting it together. So couldn't be more excited. Tim, if you would, because you have a really unique background and pathway to where you're at, talk a little bit about your pathway, including, your background in education and politics that got you to where you are as the executive director of the building trades.
Yeah, no, it really is kind of a unique background and a unique path that got me here. So, I started out as a teacher and a coach at a high school, Dublin High School in the East Bay. It's about 20 minutes outside of Oakland, kind of between Oakland and San Jose. High school teacher. But one of the things I saw is, I was teaching social studies, civics, economics. But, I saw one of the best ways to keep students engaged is, through hands-on activities. So for me as a coach, a lot of that came through athletics. Some of it came through leadership. For some, it was through drama and art. But then I saw through others, it was our trades programs. It was our auto shop. It was our wood shop. And one of the things that, unfortunately, there was a movement in the early 2000s where they decided to get rid of all those. They got rid of the shop classes because, everybody was going to go to college and everybody was going to be an engineer that has never built anything, by the way, which is just the other kind of irony. Sure. So, I'm advocating for the shop classes and, but those decisions were made. But then I started a construction trades course. That was a survey course to expose our students to the different apprentice programs. So, I did it through the continuation school and we worked with the unions and the building trades. Maybe one week we were with the electricians, the next week we were with the sheet metal, the next week we were with the iron workers. So we'd go visit the apprentice sites and then they would come back. Maybe one of their JATC coordinators would do some hands-on activities with the students, kind of in some makeshift lab space. But I saw the engagement and I saw that, hey, this is the path for so many of these people. And quite frankly, in California, we're letting a lot of these folks, these students down.
Tim, you wouldn't believe. So we do a Spark in the Dream program here with the CTE programs, career technical education programs in the public schools. And certainly we have the students on the programs. We have either the business leaders, because there's a business side and there's also the trades programs, or we have the trades leaders, and so many great stories there. And it's a whole nother show, but education is in so many different areas. Some young people are very artistic. Others follow the building trades. Others want to be lawyers and professionals. So I get it. It's a fantastic story. So I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want,
No, absolutely. And so, I had this educational background where I was seeing it, but then I also was involved in my community, got on the city council, ended up running for mayor. So during that tenure in local office, I worked closely with the trades on a variety of local issues, regional issues. So I think I kind of had this dual capacity where I work with them as an educator, and then I work with them in my capacity as an elected official. Got on the community college board. We did a, project labor agreement, expanded some of the partnerships there. And, when the opening came up in Contra Costa, between my background in government, I'd also worked for Congressman Eric Swalwell. He was one of my former students, actually. And, so I became his deputy chief of staff when I turned out as mayor. So, I had some background at the federal and state level, but then also the local level. So the building trades, when they had the opening, they saw the kind of the continuum. We need to get more people into the apprentice program and be able to speak to high schools and community colleges. We need to be able to work with local government. But then as mayor, I also work very closely with industry. And obviously the building trades, the largest private sector union works, that's our bread and butter. So that was why I was recruited.
That's a great story. And it certainly connects the dots. And so having said that, okay, as a labor leader now, okay, talk about your objectives, okay, your responsibility every day and your vision for Contra Costa County Building and Construction Trades Council.
Yeah, I mean, it's really simple. It's, increasing, as many man hours as possible for our members, and growing the share of the workforce that is in the union construction trade. So it's not a complicated mission or vision. It's when I wake up in the morning, go to bed at night, it's like, what are we doing to increase our hours, to increase our market share? So sometimes that might be, we're in the refineries. There's a lot of heavy industry in Contra Costa. It's one for California might not have. I think probably on the East Coast, you might not think of heavy industry, but in the Bay Area, there is. Although it's harder, there is still heavy industry here, and a lot of it is concentrated in our county. We do a lot of that work. So I think about that, but then also, expanding project labor agreements, public infrastructure. And just getting as much of that share as possible, getting skilled and trained workers on the sites doing that work.
And how much of your job, it's amazing you have a vast background in education, but educating end users and educating the public on what labor, what organized labor, what unions are about. How important is that? And how much time do you spend doing it?
I mean, I actually have to spend more time than I anticipate. You would think that more people would be well versed, in the Bay Area. I know there's kind of a thought, oh yeah, California left leaning, but it's not. It might be a blue state, but in terms of like blue collar issues and working class issues and union issues, there are pockets where it's really strong. But then there's others that you do have to do a lot of education, and even so-called progressives. Democrats, even some of them aren't always with us on some of the core issues.
What's interesting, because when you talk to somebody who is not familiar with labor, okay, they'll talk to, they'll ask questions like, we're all in the same union. Tell me about the union, right?
Yeah, right.
And as an executive director, now, you're not only the leader of the building trades and of the labor movement, but also you have to understand the challenges of each one. And in a sense, it's like a family, okay? And you have a lot of brothers and sisters, and each has different jurisdictions and different, areas of expertise, and sometimes they overlap. And so even though we always appear as one, sometimes your brothers and sisters they can fight, but somebody's got to be there, obviously, who understands what's going on, to manage that situation, to keep us all in the same direction. Talk about that.
Yeah, you know what? It's complicated for those that are outside. I think I've gotten a growing appreciation. Again, I come in as an outsider. I didn't come in through the tools. So, as an elected, you work with them and you think, oh yeah, they're all on the same page. And you realize basic crafts, mechanical crafts, the larger crafts, the smaller crafts, all the different issues. But part of the building trades, part of my job is to represent them all, and I learned early on, hey, you don't get involved with jurisdictional issues. Hey, there's processes for that. I just need to be the referee in terms of making sure the process is properly followed. That's the quickest way to be a short timer as a building trades executive.
You're talking to a lifetime union iron worker, and certainly, you learn a lot, especially at a young age, and most of our disputes were in that building trade softball league.
So there's all the inside stuff, but there is a lot on the outside. Like, it's interesting because I was in one community, a little bit more of a conservative community, and we're working on a project labor agreement and talking about some different issues. And, I'm saying, hey, look, a lot of our members live in this community. You could put some of our members to work. And then there was somebody that stood up against the PLA and said, well, some of that's false. I've been 27 years in the trades, and I only worked, and I think he was non-union. He didn't specify. So 27 years, and I only worked, I can count the number of weeks in 27 years that I worked on jobs in my city. And that was one of his arguments against it. I'm like, that's the argument for the PLA. Right. Like, we're trying to put your work, right, Madam Mayor, we're trying to put your workers to work. That's what the whole purpose is of this.
When you mention project labor agreement for our listeners, tell them what that is.
Yeah, I mean, it's just making sure that when a project is, you're working on it. Usually, it's public infrastructure. Sometimes it's housing or development, that you have union hands on the job, and there's processes in place. Obviously, if it's public infrastructure, it's all prevailing wage anyway. But the processes in terms of the pre-jobs, getting the work assigned, making sure that there's no strikes, making sure that you have apprentices, on the site, that there's a series of that the workers come from state approved, state certified apprentice programs. So you're getting the very best, out on the job. You're getting local hire. We do a lot of pre-apprentice work, trying to get with the local community in terms of workforce development. And again, you get the proper jurisdictions of crafts. We have processes to determine at the pre-job meetings which craft the work should appropriately be assigned to, because a lot of times at non-union jobs, you get folks working way out of classification, and you might have a carpenter doing electrician's work, you might have a laborer doing mechanical work, and the proper role is there's roles for everybody. Everybody benefits when we all work together, and you get better projects built. And you put more people to work, you get things done faster, on time, on budget, when you do it with the project labor agreement.
And it protects the bid. And like you mentioned, the fact of the matter is there's not going to be any work stoppages. Right. It's a commitment forever, between the owner of the project and the labor unions, obviously to meet those deadlines and do what it takes to get a quality job done. When you talk about, your Contra Costa, okay. What are some of the primary critical issues that you face on a regular basis?
Well, I mean, right now, I think it's the economy is slowing down. So I think one of the things that we're seeing is, there's just less work out there. There's a lot of these cuts, a lot of with the tariffs and different things. A lot of folks are pulling back. So there's a reduction overall in man hours, both union and non-union, but certainly on the union side, when public infrastructure projects slow down, that's a threat. I mean, the other thing is a lot of our members work in the refineries, and that's an industry, and I know that we'll dive deeper into that probably in the next segment, but I mean, that's one industry where we have 9 refineries in California. We've had 2 announced closures just in the 5 months that I've been in my position. One not in Contra Costa, right across the way in Solano, the announced closure of a Valero refinery, and then P66. It's in Southern California, but it puts pressure on the whole industry, and there's just a lot of challenges, a lot of uncertainty. We had a fire at one of our refineries. Thank God no one was hurt. But then the question becomes, does the refinery put the investment in the rebuild and the restart, and are they able to overcome the regulatory environment here in California to do that? So I mean, those are things that are challenges that we're working through.
And when you talk about that, once you shut a refinery down, it typically doesn't come back. And what happens, by the way, to those resources, to those materials that were being refined at that refinery, okay, they become imported, okay, because we don't stop needing them, okay, and educating the public, especially on the Labor and Energy Show, to the fact that our refineries, our traditional energy resources, are so much more efficient in America, okay, so much more environmentally sound, okay. One of the confusing things that I think people don't understand is that we do it better here, okay? Sure. But now we're getting everything imported where we can't do anything about it in regards to where it's getting refined. And so it's certainly important for us to educate the public there. When you talk about some of those issues, one of the things you wanted to talk about, Tim, was gas affordability, okay? Talk about that, okay? Because it's certainly a factor, especially on the workforce.
Well, yeah, it's such a bigger issue for us, because I always talk about it when we talk about refineries. As obviously people say, oh yeah, well, Tim, he represents the refinery workers. Of course, he talks about them. But I said, look, outside of just my workers, I said, every one of my members gets in a truck every day and drives to a job site. They don't get to choose where their job site is. It's anywhere in the county. And they don't get the luxury of telecommuting. They don't get to work from home. They don't get to, the job site's not near a bus stop or a rail line. They need their tools. So every one of my members is impacted by gas prices, and not just my members. Everyone who's in healthcare, everyone who's a teacher, everyone who's in public safety, the grocery clerk, those that are on the front lines of service, they are all impacted by gas prices. It's not just my members in the refineries that are impacted by these issues.
So when you talk about that, okay, what in particular, and especially in your neck of the woods, is the problem? And in other words, I know that there's an impact, taxes and fees and costs, obviously of the climate programs. Talk about those things that add, obviously they add to the cost of the gas. Okay, address that issue, because obviously, like you mentioned, it impacts really everybody who's got a vehicle.
Well, one of the things is, there's a lot on those things to unpack. But one thing I just want to say that's really simple, and where I start with is this, and maybe it's just because I was a high school economics teacher. I'm like, look, it's supply and demand. We went from 9 refineries, now we're going down to 7 with others in danger. There's only certain refineries that make the California blend. It's not something that's everywhere. So if you have the same demand and you have less supply, it's like the prices go up. Like, again, I'm the high school economics teacher, but sometimes it helps to bring people back to the classroom, because I will, and I know we'll get into it a little bit more about some of the specifics that lead to some of these escalating prices, but some of it is as simple as you have less supply and the same demand, prices are going to go up. It's not that complicated.
Tim, what is the when you ask that question, because like you just said, we still have the same demand. Okay, mm-hmm. Shut the refinery down. Okay, where do you get the extra fuel? Okay, where do you get the where do you get the fuel that we shut down? Okay, what is the answer to that question? When you're talking to the powers that be that want the refinery shut down, we still need the fuels. Now we can't control the efficiency of the refiner. Okay, somebody else is doing that. We all live in the same world. I'm an environmentalist. We all are. Okay, 100%. So what is the answer to that question when you ask somebody? Okay, now we're not doing it. It's being done, refined, in a different location, maybe a different country, with less environmental standards. What's the answer to that question that you get?
Well, there's no answer to it, because it's when you make that point, there's not much that can be said. It's like, look, we're going to get the oil from somewhere. So we're going to get it from China. Okay, that's we're on the West Coast. It's going to be shipped across the Pacific in a refinery with virtually no environmental or labor standards. So there's that. Then it's going to be shipped on a dirty ship across, so it's costing consumers more, and it's the net is worse on the environment, and worse for labor standards. So when you make those points, I have yet to hear a good, compelling argument. They want to change the conversation, quite frankly, because it's common sense.
Yeah, but lives, including their lives, are being impacted. Okay, working together, in my opinion, has always been, the best solution. And we talk a lot about common sense and energy. Okay, and taking an approach where everybody works together and we don't do anything stupid.
Yeah, that's right.
And unfortunately, those questions, if you care about the environment like we all do, they need to be answered. What we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to continue to touch on this particular conversation, because it's certainly an important one, especially in your neck of the woods. We're going to have more from the Labor and Energy Show in just a minute.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let Jacob Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call Jacob Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428. Welcome back to the Labor and Energy Show on the Jacob Media Network. We're in the middle of a coast-to-coast conversation with Tim Sbranti, who was the executive director of the Contra County Building and Construction Trades Council. Certainly, Tim, we're talking obviously about the gas affordability issues. Hey, when you talk about obviously work isn't as good right now. I mean, especially in our neck of the woods. Guys, men and women are still driving to the union hall. Okay,
Yeah.
They're still trying to, the way we did it in our union. I know every other union does it differently, but we go up to the union hall on a daily basis. You need gas for that, by the way, and so not to mention obviously going out to the jobs. One of the things that is going on, and Adrian Broca had sent this to me. California SB 237, okay? I know California Democrats introduced a sweeping bill to cap carbon prices, okay? Certainly it's at the beginning stages of that, but talk about that if you would.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a growing recognition, I would say. I mean, if I want to have been critical at one point, I also want to be somewhat optimistic. I would say even as 6 months ago, even as I was starting, it was more, you had a lot of Democrats going after big oil, going after the refineries. And I think these closures have shook a lot of people, and folks that were on one side of this issue are now coming around, say, look, we just need to be partners in this, and not constantly go after the industry, with a hammer, but we need to be able to try to, and that's one of our messages, is saying, look, we want to, obviously, if there's gross violations or bad actors, they should be held accountable. There's regulations for that. And you said it at the outset, we all want a clean environment. We all breathe the air. We all live here, but there's ways to do it. And there's ways, if you partner and you look at best practices, one of the challenges with the regulatory environment is we had one refinery that was actually trying to invest in certain technologies that would actually improve some of their environmental efficiencies, and the time to get a permit in the regulatory environment, through the air district, it's like, well, wait a minute, like they're trying to make things better. There should be a permitting process that allows that to occur quicker. So I think it's just kind of a holistic approach to what are we doing in Sacramento at the state legislature, and what are we doing in terms of those regional agencies with regulatory authority to try to partner with the industry. I mean, permitting reform is a massive problem across the country. No question about it. Certainly, what it does is it handcuffs us here in the United States. A lot of the injustices that are going on overseas, we can't even do anything about because we can't get the permits to open up the facilities to be able to even compete or remedy those situations. It's ironic in a sense. We started the Labor and Energy show, and then the Labor and Energy Alliance, based on a situation here in Philly. We've done the labor show for a decade, Joe Krausey and I, and we had a situation with PES Refinery. There was a fire there. Again, no injuries, and there was 33 units. One unit was impacted. Okay, they shut the whole damn thing down. Okay, an entire community was impacted. Okay, now we are importing those same resources. Okay, and we cannot control the individuals overseas when it comes to environment, when it comes to efficiency. So that is the exact situation. If you really care about the environment, what's the plan for that situation? Okay, because I live on this planet. It's a big planet. Okay, emissions, affects us all. So we're on the same page there. And ironically, that's how we got it. By the way, I'll never forget that situation where
normally as a labor community here in Philly, we have we're involved and engaged in the community and politics and all them. It was crickets, man. It was crickets. And so it certainly got us interested in what's going on. And now, across the country, it's just a fantastic dialogue. So certainly, we were talking about SB 237, and it's early in the game, and it's awesome to see, in a sense, that that it's a bill that Democrats put on the table. Okay, and you gotta, it's a long-term process, but certainly, like you said, you shut a couple refineries down, okay, and you see the impact. Okay, it has to open up some eyes to it.
Well, it definitely is. It's interesting to see the politics shift, and I don't want to get too deep into the politics, but you look at Governor Newsom, in the fall of 24, was calling a special session of the legislature to basically, look at different ways to go after the industry, and it was, a tough session. Then all of a sudden, you get a couple of these closures. You get a couple of these threatened closures, and you see what might happen in some of the studies that show gas prices going over $8 a gallon. And now his administration, and again, you take what you get. It's not someone. He's the governor, so you work with him, you work with his office, and you welcome the change in posture. You don't want to say, "Well, you weren't with us 6 months." That's not how it works. It's like, hey, you know what? If you're with us now, let's figure out some of these different things. So we'll see Senator Grayson, who's our local state senator. He's the one carrying the bill. We'll be supporting that through the process and hope that it gets through. It's still an uphill climb in the legislature because you still, again, it's a blue state, but I'd say a lot of the blue progressivism it has more on the social environmental front than on the labor front. So one of the things that we're trying to do in the building trades is making sure that we build that coalition hey, these are working, these are union jobs, and these are things that benefit, the economy and benefit the environment. I went to the Air District last week, and I wrote a 3-page letter. I had 3 asks to our local Bay Area Air District. Number one, when you're looking at all regulations, and again, regulations are necessary. I want to be clear. We're not saying that this should be just a no regulatory environment. Refineries do whatever. Look, our workers need that safety. But they have to be reasonable, and they have to be evaluated in terms of, and what I put forward was, and not just me, in coalition with other building trades leaders from the Bay Area, we put together saying there should be a social economic policy so that when you're looking at environmental regulations, you are also weighing the socioeconomic impacts, whether that's looking at Black and brown communities, whether that's looking at the prices to consumers, and whether saying like, is the benefit from going, one tiny bit tighter, does the net, I use the phrase net, is the net outweigh? And that's kind of when we're talking about, again, the oil being shipped from China, the other environmental. So it's like, yeah, you can get an incremental benefit to the environment in the Bay Area through something, but that net cost is greater on the environment, greater on the economy. So that's one ask. The second ask is related to permitting. The Air District right now has 14 positions slotted to help with permitting. They're only staffing 8. They have the money to bolster that to the 14. It's like, look, hire the staff that you have the budget to do, because that permitting is what holds up our workers from going to work. It holds up refiners from making some of those investments. So it was a request about the permitting process. And the third one was the simplest ask. It's like, hey, look, you've got committees for everything under the sun. The transit committee, the bike and ped committee, the social justice committee, the environmental committee. Hey, what about a labor industry committee, that works with the Air District? And to me, it doesn't seem like a novel idea, but it doesn't exist. It's like, why? Why does this not exist? Let's put something like that together where we're able to tackle these issues in collaboration and figure out some solutions. So those are some of just the common sense things that here at the building trades in Contra Costa, we're trying to introduce to regional regulators.
And the thing is, you're opening up a dialogue, okay? And certainly, one of the things, since we've been doing the broadcast, okay, and it's been over 3 years now, I can tell you this, having this conversation, I have never met more environmentalists than I have met with the traditional energy resources and companies that we've dealt with. In other words, common sense, okay, and working together is the theme, okay, and certainly, but that has to be a two-way street, Tim. And I think you're on a great path there. And obviously, what happens in California, you are on the front lines, okay, and so what happens there obviously impacts the rest of the country. So it's a great.
And the other thing I want to say, this because this is the labor and energy show. It's not the labor and oil show. We are an all of the above approach. So
no question.
And for us, so we're leaders in it's called the Green Empowerment Zone. It was a state legislation. We were sponsors. We sit at the table for it. Looking at what are some of these green energy sources, because those should be union jobs too. Whether it's in the hydrogen sector, whether it's, with wind farms, there's a lot of different things that we can build, we can maintain, and a resilient economy, a healthy economy that works for working people has an all of the above approach. But it's like what we talk about with the refineries is, and this is one of the things I tell lawmakers is we can't, when you talk about just transition, that's kind of the fancy phrase. What my members hear is just unemployment. Like that's what just transition to some of them means.
No question about it. And by the way, our organization, obviously we talk about the petrochemical industry, but also we have Marcellus Shale, okay, natural gas involved. We have members of the National Mining Association. We've done a number of broadcasts on solar, okay, and so all of the above strategy, we're on the same page there.
100%. Yeah, it is all the above, and so part of that is when they work to just overregulate and go after refineries, and then you get some of those in the far left environmental circles that celebrate a refinery closure. I'm like, this is no celebration. In addition to the thousands of jobs lost, and obviously the rise of the costs that we've already talked about, what is the replacement energy source? We don't have the green infrastructure built yet. We don't have the transmission lines. We don't have the charging stations. Everybody talks about electric. And again, let's build those things with union hands. We are all for it. All this green energy, we are for it. But until you have all that infrastructure in place, you're relying on it. And even when you have some of these transitions into the green energy sectors, you're still going to have the need for oil and gas to be done efficiently, responsibly, in environmentally conscious ways in the United States and not in countries around the world where, as you said, those standards don't exist.
Well, it's funny because I'm actually chat GPT-ing something right here live on the broadcast. Okay?
There we go.
And how about that? And so when you sit down and talk about for every refinery that gets closed here in the United States, how many are built in China? Okay, and I'm looking at the list. Okay, and when you talk about what's it say? U.S. closures, 9 refineries in 2020. Their new capacity equates to around 14 to 15 refineries in the same period. So what they're doing is we're dropping a ball and they're picking it up and increasing it. And I care about the environment. Okay. You're talking about, and when you look at it, Tim, you're talking about the loss of jobs and all those things. And then when, as far as emissions and all those things, it's not like we're lowering what we're doing and the whole world staying behind us. Okay. Right. Paris Accord too. What the hell is that doing? So anyway, we're on the same page there, and our whole motto is exactly the same thing you're talking about. An all the above approach. Everybody knows that renewables are here to stay. Okay, and going to be a huge part of our energy portfolio here in the United States. Okay, we can't just press a button, like you said, and working together to do this the right way in a common sense is really what we're all about. So Obviously we appreciate what you're doing there. And certainly, like I said, on the front lines. One of the things, we have only a few minutes left. This has been the fastest hour in radio, by the way. Wanted to talk about, you talk a lot about quality, well-trained workforce, okay? The benefits of labor, because a lot of people don't, obviously they especially like here in Philly, we have the union rat and all. People don't, when they look at that, they just think we're a bunch of thugs. But the truth is, in a lot of ways, we're protesting people who are being taken advantage of and all those things. And sometimes that's not pretty. Okay. But let's talk about some of the great things that labor does, that the quality, well-trained workforce and the benefits of that to employers and project owners, Tim.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things when I talk about educating, I always start with there's the obvious union benefits, which I'll talk about, but I always lean into especially in the trades, to health and safety. That's something for a company, their bottom line, when you reach out to them, it's like, look, having a skilled and trained workforce will lead to a safer environment. It doesn't mean a risk-free environment without accidents. These are inherently risky industries, but you will have trained professionals where you're going to have less of that. You're going to have, the work's going to get done better, in terms of some of the health impacts of the society. But for the workers themselves, obviously the salary, but actually having a pension, actually having some healthcare benefits. When you have some of the non-union workers, in addition to not having some of the same level of skilled training, but you don't have any of those other reciprocal benefits that have been the backbone of the American economy literally since the turn of the 20th century. I mean, that's what the labor movement's all about. And that's what we have for our members in the trades. While going with the union craft, it also saves money, because a lot of these folks, here's what people don't realize, is when you have a union healthcare plan or union benefits, if you don't have that, those workers have to rely on the public system where they're showing up, they're not getting the same type of coverage from their employers, or they're retiring without that type of a pension. So they're leaning heavier on public benefits. That's taxpayer paid benefits. So being in a union, being part of a pension plan, having a healthcare coverage, in addition to just being a social good and the right thing to do for the betterment of all, but it also has a public impact as well. And I found even the more conservative leaning taxpayer, when you put it in that phrase, it's like, well, do you want someone that has a pension, or do you want someone that has to show up at the emergency room every time they need something? Is that what you want? Is that good for society? You're paying for that. You have that conversation with folks, and you start to, it's not that they come around immediately, but you got to plant the seeds and have those conversations so people see the broader perspective.
And what we say, it's the difference between having a job and a career.
That's right.
And as I think about it, your career path is amazing, because you educated young men and women, okay, and then you gravitated towards helping them get careers, okay, where there's a future, where there's retirement, so that, and obviously when we talk about apprentice programs, the unions, okay, self-funded, earn while you learn, education. I mean, it's the life's blood of what we do. Tim, we only have 3 minutes left, and before we talk, we need to do part 2, like literally right away, because I barely touched my notes, and this is so incredible. But touch on the apprentice programs.
Yeah, we have apprentice program. We have 20 affiliates, in Contra, Costa, all with the apprentice program. We reach into the K-12s, we reach into the community colleges, but not just that, adult education, foster. We work with the county in terms of the county jails. We have a helmets to hard hats program, through the building trade. So, and these are all things that we need to bolster to do even more of, because these are folks that are ripe for careers. And when we work with them to get them through the process, but part of what I tell, policymakers at the local level, because they love all these things, but then you have to say, hey, you know what? All these people, you want all these apprentices, all these careers, and you all like to show up at the apprentice hall. Oh, isn't this great? Isn't this amazing? You have a responsibility to put them to work once they come through the apprentice hall. You got public infrastructure, you're building a library, Mr. Mayor, you're building a swim center, Madam Mayor, now what about these folks from the local apprentice? So trying to always make that connection so people can see that. And then the other thing that we're really involved with is pre-apprentice, because it's not like you can just walk into an apprentice site and just become an apprentice. There's tests you have to pass. There's certain skills that you need. So we lean with our nonprofit partner, CTWI, which is the Construction Training Workforce Initiative, to do some pre-apprentice work to get some of these able candidates qualified to get into the trades programs.
And when you talk about the education and the pre-apprentice programs, you mentioned it. You talk about safety. Okay. When you talk about end users, you talk about the community. It's a big part of our education. My father taught me. He was our business manager of our union. One hand for yourself, one hand for the company. It's built in. Okay. Yep. Plus all the training, the safety training, the job stewards that you have. That saves, the owner of the project and the employer a ton of money. Talk about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it does. I mean, the fact that we do a lot of that training for them, when they come in, and they get dispatched out of a hall, I mean, they're ready to work. They know exactly what they need to do. And if you're an employer that's, this non-union person today, this other non-union person tomorrow, I'm not saying that there's not skilled professionals who are non-union, but when you cut someone out of the hall, you're going to get someone that's had the highest level of training. I tell her a lot, hey, come see our union training halls. I mean, come see it for yourself. You'll see the difference. I invite them. And I think once they see it, they realize it right away.
Fantastic. Well, Tim, I mean, this has been the fastest hour in radio. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate you at the early hour, that you're joining us. And so, I want to thank Tim Sbranti, Contra Costa Building and Construction Trades Council Executive Director, for being on the program. Tim, can't wait to have you on the program again, my friend.
It's been a pleasure, and I barely touched my notes as well, so we'll get to more next time.
Sounds good. We'll have more from the Labor and Energy Show in just a minute.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let Jacob Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call Jacob Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428. And back here on the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. Really good conversation. JDoc, I got to tell you, I've heard you many times reference not getting through all of your notes, but when your guest doesn't get through even a small amount of notes, the dialogue was good. Really, really good conversation in both segments today.
Oh, yeah. And Joe, I mean, I couldn't be more impressed by Tim. My first thought in the middle of the conversation was, we are in good hands on the West Coast. Okay. We have, you talk, what was really amazing, Tim's pathway. Okay. From an educator.
I love it. I love listening to it too, as well.
Somebody really cares when they gravitate to educating and providing opportunities for young people. And then also, obviously, workers and workers' rights and conditions, and also an amazing community person. So, and understands energy and fantastic conversation with Tim Sbranti, and can't wait to do it again, man.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely have to put him in the re-queue for an additional schedule, one or two, just to do a follow-up to the program. We thank everybody, of course, for listening into the Labor and Energy Show. Again, a reminder, you can consume the content via Apple TV, Roku TV, Fire TV. You can listen to the broadcast via Apple or Spotify. and of course across the radio network as well. So the educational model that was started over 3 years ago continues to provide just that, JDoc, good education, and a great guest today joining us on the show. Before we say goodbye, I've got about 45 seconds. I'll give that to you as I normally do, just to put a kind of a recap and a bow on today's program, and then I'll send us off and send us out to our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, I think anybody that listened to the program, okay, understands that, and you and I have talked about it many times, okay, with a labor background, but common sense and energy and working together is the answer, okay, and making sure that, okay, obviously our jobs are important, okay, affordability in gas, okay, the expenses that we use every day, and then maintaining our environment, which is important to us. Okay. And so an all of the above approach, but also an environment where you talk about our refineries, so important to us and our way of life. Okay. And in the United States, nobody does it more efficiently or more environmentally sound. Okay. Safer. And so like we said, nothing's perfect, but we do it better in the United States, okay? And we need to maintain control. We need to maintain control, as well as obviously, do a great job with our workforce. Everybody working together, Joe, and we can't lose.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Labor and Energy Show as we bring the month of June to a close with this final special edition of the Labor and Energy Show. We get set to move into the month of July on behalf of our very special guest, Tim out in the West Coast, and on behalf of my partner, JDoc, who did a great job today in his dialogue and conversation, and all of our listeners and viewers tuning in to the ever-popular Labor and Energy Show. I'm Joe Kraus. See you next time, everyone.
Welcome to the Jet Setters and the High Rollers, to the Thrill Seekers and the Night Owls. Welcome to everything you could possibly want on one 5-mile island. Welcome to the Wildwoods. Book your stay today.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let Jacob Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call Jacob Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.